Great. That's cool. No, it's wonderful to have such a nice group. And we wanted to have this as a kind of informal conversation as well, so that we could get input from the audience too. So instead of just having us talking, to also get feedback from you as we go along later on as well. But okay, I'm going to stop sharing for now. Let's get everyone on the screen. Good. No, it's wonderful to have you all here. So welcome. So good evening, good morning, or good afternoon. I don't know where you all coming from, but we've got a very cold day here in Joburg, and hopefully no power outages coming. We hope. But it's really wonderful to have you here. I'm Tammy Hodgskiss, and I'm the curator at Origin Centre, and we have Ann with us today. I'm not sure, I can't, Ann's got a video off at the moment, so Ann Gollifer with us today, and Tumelo Nkwe as well. We've had a little bit of a change of plans, sadly, because there's been a really big spike in COVID cases in Botswana, and so they've had to enforce a curfew, and so we were unable to get Motsei to come to Ann's house to talk to us tonight. But Ann and Tumi have been missioning around in the last few days, and they've got wonderful footage of interviews with Motsei in her home. So she's basically invited us to her home and her village to see what she does. So it's really special as well. So we're going to be playing some really nice videos later on. And then also hopefully we'll have those on YouTube so we can watch them afterwards as well. And then the plan going forward is also to have, we would love to find a way to bring Motsei and Tumi to Joburg at some point to maybe have a workshop, have another one of these conversations where we can get a whole lot of people that are interested in ochre and earth pigments and art to bring us all together to kind of see how we can connect and learn from each other. So that would be a lovely thing to happen in the future. So, but firstly, I just want to thank our collaborators. So it's Origin Centre and Wits, and then also the Guns and Rain Art Gallery, who are representing Ann Gollifer. So that's Julie Taylor at Guns and Rain, that have been collaborating on this, and then Petra Mason with the African Art Galleries Association, that actually got the whole ball rolling and got us to connect with each other. Anne and I have kind of met through various means. Elizabeth or Beth Velicki kind of introduced us initially, and then there's other connections, and Anne has mentioned a few times how ochre seems to bring people together, you know, and you kind of find these paths to people, and it's interesting that we've just come to each other in two different ways. So it's really cool. So what we're going to do when we start talking, so just the order of events, I'm going to just quickly introduce Anne and Tumi and Motsei, and just let you know a little bit about their background. Then if I can find my cheat sheet. Then I'm going to be, I'll talk for a little bit just about the deep time uses of ochre, and then Anne will talk and we'll show the videos of Motsei in that conversation, then speak to Tumi, but he's also done a lot of work with Anne, going around with Anne and Motsei, and so also Motsei, and has a whole lot of information I'm sure he can share with us as well. And then we'd like to open the conversation up to you. So then we can, while we're doing our presentations, if you can just turn off the videos so that we can make sure that we can, that everything goes through smoothly. But otherwise at the end, we'll maybe turn on our videos again and we can have a nice conversation with each other. Okay, so firstly, just Ann Gollifer is a British Guyanese visual artist who has lived and worked in Gaborone in Botswana since 1985. She is a multidisciplinary artist, and her current practice centers around watercolors made from ochres sourced in Botswana. And she's going to be talking a lot about the amazing stuff and showing you some of her amazing artworks that she's made, and also talk about how her relationship with Motsei. So Motsei Nkwemabala is of Herero Mokgatla heritage, and she's from Mochudi town, which is north of Gaborone, about 45 kilometers. So that's where Anne and Tumi were going off to in the last few days. And she is one of the few women who still annually paint their earth buildings with ochres collected from traditional dig sites around the village. She is also a healer specializing in women's health. Tumelo Nkwe is Mokgatla and is originally from Mochudi as well. He lives and works in Gaborone, where he is a production manager for a film production company and is currently the secretary of the Art Residency Center. Tumi accompanies Anne on her ochre field trips and acts as a translator when necessary. So you'll see him in the videos helping to translate. Cool, and I'm an archaeologist as well with a background in ochre, and it's been really exciting in the last year actually, to connect with so many more people that are working with ochre in different ways, not only in the archaeological science world, but also in art and so many different ways in their everyday life. So let me share my screen. Okay, hope you can all see that. Okay, so I thought I should start off just by talking about what is ochre, because it's such a general term, and it's a term that's used to describe a whole range of earth pigments, usually iron oxide rich and iron rich pigments, and in the archaeology we're finding mostly yellows, oranges and reds. But it's a range of minerals, so from really hard hematites to nice soft clays and soft shales. And you can just see just from this image a whole range of different types that fall under this term ochre. And I prefer to use the term ochre to coloring materials or pigments, because in the past, that's the whole debate, is how did early modern humans and how did humans in the past actually use these materials? Because even now, they're used in so many different ways and not just as a pigment. So, and in archaeology, the issue that always comes up is preservation. There's so much that isn't preserved, and we're dealing with these little remnants of what's been left behind. And that happens with ochre as well. Even though as a material itself, it's very durable, a lot of the use of ochre is invisible. It was either used on the body or ingested or used on different artifacts, and it hasn't preserved for us to see it. So there might have even been other pigments and dyes that were used and other colors, and we just don't have evidence of that anymore. And so we have to try find out the meaning behind the use. You know, it's relatively easy to find out the when and the how and the where, but to find out the why, and actually why humans use these materials for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, is the difficult part. But there's a lot of new analytical techniques and excavation techniques and experimental archaeology that has really helped inform us on how ochre was used. And then also what's going to be important with the discussion today is looking at the ethnographic and contemporary understandings of ochre to help inform past interpretations. So the earliest evidence of ochre use goes really far back to 500,000 years ago. And it's at some sites around Southern Africa, especially, that you're finding a few pieces that have been collected and brought back to the site. Some of them have signs of use, but often these earlier collections of ochre are actually just pieces of ochre being brought back to sites. Maybe they were obviously seen as something valuable to bring back, but weren't necessarily processed that we can see or used in any way that we can see. And then ochre becomes widespread across the world, across continents and through time, that in the last 20,000 years and in the last 2,000 years, you're finding so much ochre being used in different ways. So for paint or for preservation or for ritual, and used found with symbolic objects as well, or even used as a fertilizer. So it has such a big wide range of uses. But what is impactful about the material is this red, that you often find this red and this bright red being used, which is such a powerful color to humans, and it's the color of our blood. And so it's hard to know if in the past, when you're dealing with early modern humans, where there's still debate as to whether they were cognitively the same as us now, did they see colors and did they see this material in the same way? So from about 100,000 years ago, you're finding really common use of ochre. It's almost a regular activity at sites. Some sites in Southern Africa, you're finding, so this is mostly in Africa, but at sites in Southern Africa, you're finding some collections that are over 10,000 pieces of ochre. So people were collecting a lot of the ochre, only using a small portion, still hundreds of pieces being used, and used in different ways. and different types of ochre being collected, obviously from different places. But it also seems like there was a preference to use certain types of ochre, shiny ochres or red ochres. So the whole question is kind of why? Why were people using this material? And with this regular use of ochre, there's also a whole range of other behavioral innovations that we see in the archaeology. So from about 150,000 years ago, we're starting to see things that these early Homo sapiens had a lot of cognitive abilities similar to ours. So we know they were anatomically modern, but the debate of whether they were actually the same as us cognitively is still quite hard to know. And so you're finding these really nice stone tools that are a complex technology and understanding of different raw materials and being able to manipulate them, or to put stone tools onto hafts, actually put them onto handles like knives, using different raw materials like bone tools, or bone to make tools. Then objects like engraved ostrich eggshell or perforated shell beads that might have been decorative items, or could have been items that were used as tallying devices. So a definite idea of storing information outside the brain, and more emphasis being placed on objects that are outside the body. Then the spatial use of sites and insecticidal leaves and bedding and cooking of different plant materials. So a really good understanding of the landscape, and a very complex understanding. So not just simplistic understanding of how to use things, but a really advanced understanding. Also this middle picture at the bottom, the collection of crystals. So why were they brought back to site and not used? Is it something similar to ochre? Were they seen as some special stone, but why weren't they used? And then also some examples of deliberate burials. So when you're going back to the ochre, the ochre itself is used in a whole lot of different ways. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of things we don't see, and that comes in with the crushing of the ochre. So the way that we would process pigment now to make paint, we would crush it up with a nice soft ochre, crush it up, and then use the paint. And we don't find a lot of this paint being used in the Middle Stone Age from 100,000 years ago. There's no evidence of painted rock art, for example. And so we have the pieces, you find them processed in different ways, maybe ground against a stone, or they look like some soft pieces have been maybe rubbed directly on skin or onto hide, or scored in different ways. So this piece is quite a well-known, the middle piece, from Blombos Cave on the southern Cape Coast, with really nice definite engravings, an intentional design engraved on the piece. We don't know what the design meant, but we do know that there was an intentionality between in the actual engraving of that piece. And then, so apart from the pieces that we find, we also find ochre powder at sites. So with the crushing, we find these some sites that you get these layers of ochre powder. So maybe a processing area, maybe it was something else, so that's where ochre was being used, we don't know. But you find it on the edge of some tools that maybe it was, this one specifically was mixed with milk product, and actually was maybe used to scrape hides. It's a scraping tool. These tools in the middle at the bottom have some ochre residues on them, and the plant gum or plant resin was actually mixed with ochre and used as a glue and stuck onto a handle. So there's a whole lot of different uses, not just making a paint. But the two pictures on the right-hand side from Blombos, these are two perlemon or abalone shells that have ochre powder mixed with seal fat and charcoal. And so this is a definite paint mixed in a beautiful natural container, but there's no evidence of what the paint was used for. And so it's really difficult to know how, it was made for a purpose, but we don't know. Then I also had to show this example of ochre drawing. It's kind of seen as the world's oldest hashtag, and with ochre lines kind of drawn on the edge of the surface of a piece. But then we also find ochre residues in shell beads. And so there's a lot of ochre being used in the past, and mostly focused on red ochre, but it's hard to know what the actual reason was for it. And for me, it's really important to looking at using ochre. In archaeology, you don't get to touch a lot of the ochre. You don't get to try it. The pieces you find have to stay untouched. And so it's been experimental archaeology is really good with that, to help us to actually use modern examples to reconstruct some of the activities, to see if that's maybe how ochre was used. So there's a range of ochre researchers that have looked at this. So to looking at different ways of heating ochre. So to get from the yellow ochre to the red, you can heat it from an iron oxyhydroxide to an iron oxide. And maybe people in the past actually had an understanding that it was happening with stone tool raw materials. So maybe they were heating ochre as well to change the qualities of the ochre to get this red ochre. But then red ochres are really good for hide tanning. They can help the decay process with hides. They also, Rian Rifkin did some experiments with sunscreen, and a red ochre is a more effective barrier against the sun than yellow ochre. And so it's interesting, there's a lot of different chemical reasons why ochre might have been used, and why red ochre specifically, that might inform how it was used in the past as well. But also we still won't know if there was, like with the Ovahimba in Namibia, like the top right-hand picture, they use the ochre paste on their bodies as sunscreen, but it also has a ritual purpose. So yeah, as I mentioned, in the last year, it's been wonderful to kind of reconnect with people, or connect with people that are working with ochre in different ways, and using it as a pigment. And yeah, and I think it's something that as ochre researchers, it's really easy to kind of stay in our box. And it's important to be objective, but I think it's also really nice to explore other uses, because that's potentially what these early modern humans were doing in the past. And so the contemporary and historic and ethnographic uses of ochre are also really important to help us interpret ochre use. Were people in the past ingesting it to help stomach cramps, as does happen now? What types of ochre were used for that? So there's a lot of different things and a lot of questions still that need to be answered. And hopefully we can, all the ochre researchers that are working on this, it would be really nice to reconnect and look at the different ways that ochre might have been used, and different types of ochre could be used, not just only for its color. But I'm going to pass over to Ann now. So that's my talk. So really, in a nutshell, the history of, or the deep history of ochre use. And I'm going to pass over to Ann. So Ann, you can turn on your video.
Yep.
Cool.
Here I am.
Okay, great. Cool. So, and over to you, Ann.
Thank you. Thanks, Tammy. It's just an amazing thing. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. And it's an amazing thing how so much of what you're talking about bleeds into my work, in the sense that it informs, in a way, what I do, because there is this incredible fascination with what was happening in the past, and then what it means now. And I kind of think that the mystery of that is somehow a powerful thing. And maybe it doesn't matter if we never know all the answers in the end. But it's great. It's a great thing in our lives to do the research and ask questions and be curious, because then it opens so many doors and worlds in the way that it has done for me in my practice, where I've had many different ways of working with many different materials, acrylic, oil. And I think my work has always been very material based. I've always loved the idea of, well, process. And in 2018, I did a residency in Sweden at Diaspus, courtesy of the Swedish government. And I was looking at decolonization and critical theory. It was very it was the contemporary thing, the way everyone was working. And I came from a very practice-based studio practice. And I found myself thinking, how do I cope with all of this? And how do I stay true to what I believe in? And I'd already started to be really interested in the beauty of watercolor and its thinness and its reference to, in a way, skin on paper. And so it was a really easy decision that I made to actually narrow my range of colors to the earth colors. And the ochres, I didn't understand earth, pigment, ochres, but the colors are just so beautiful. Tammy, if you could just give me the next 1 and 2 slides, just the there's something magical and sexy about the colors on earth, on rock, on skin, and they kind of reference human skin, but they also that range, but they also reference our earth and the planet. And I found that fascinating. So I started buying pigment and mixing it with gum arabic. And I bought my first batches of pigment in London, and I came home to Botswana and I had this fabulous pigment. And then we had the lockdown and I kind of used it all up. So I would like now to talk about how I turned my eyes to the beautiful, amazing, how would I say, collection or pigments that are right here that I walk on every day or I see every day, and how I discovered those. And I think that Julie is going to put on a beautiful video with no sound of Motsei in her situation, and then over that I will talk about how I found the Botswana pigments. So basically, last year I was working with the pigments, the commercial pigments I'd bought, and mixing them with gum arabic and learning how to use them. And after lockdown, I made a break out of Gaborone and went to Putatukobo Museum in Machudi, which is about 50 km north of Gaborone. It's a traditional town. And in the museum, I saw these incredible cakes of ochre, and I knew what they were immediately. And I've always been fascinated by them. And so I spoke to the people at the museum and I said, where can I get these? And very kindly, they gave me some lumps of earth. And they said, if you come back, we can go and we can show you the traditional collection sites. And generally speaking, as far as I know, it was the women's job to use the ochres they found in the land in the village to decorate the houses. And it's been something that I've absolutely adored looking at it throughout Botswana, is the traditionally painted houses. And I must say, it has got less and less and less as people have started building in cement and using tin. You see fewer and fewer earth houses, traditional houses. So off we went. And that's how I met Motsei. I basically met her in a yellow riverbed. I think, can we have some slides? Back to the slides. So I met her in a yellow riverbed, and we it was almost like having an instant connection with the earth, we were both collecting earth. I think I said to her, "Oh, Mang, what are you doing?" And she was like, "Oh, well, I'm collecting earth." And yeah, and that's how we met. And she then started to provide me with the colors that she was working with. And it was really a really wonderful thing, because I can't walk into a village with a spade and start digging up earth. And that's another reason why it's been amazing to have the companionship of Tumelo, who works with me. He's Mokatla, and he joins me when I go to the village. And Motsei was the other side of that triangle where we formed a really beautiful group, and she gives me earth. And I go to her house, and I've always also invited her to my studio. And so what happened was, once I started learning to work with the pigment, the earth cakes, and then crushing them into fine particles and mixing them with gum arabic, I decided to start making my very first Botswana, using the Botswana palette to make paintings. This image that you're seeing right now, that other image was my favorite color, which is a red from Sinete. But anyway, so these are the earth cakes that Motsei provided me with, and they're in themselves, they're absolutely beautiful. They're sculptural, they have beautiful color, they have beautiful texture, they smell delicious. And at this point, I think it would be really nice for us to have some videos where Motsei introduces herself. Can we swap over there? Okay, here we go. I'll just mute.
Can't hear the sound. Cool. I'm just going to try to get the sound. Hold on.
Very complex.
Like in a much dimension.
Try share the screen.
Ke nna Motsei Nkwemabala. Ke nna mo Motšhudi. Ke tsholetse mo Motšhudi. Ke nyalwa ke bo Dr Nkwemabala ko mo dikolong. Mo Motšhudi ke tsalwa mo khotleng ya Archaeology. Mme o bidiwa ke Lapile Lebotse mo khotleng ya Archaeology ke mokgatla mo Motšhudi. Nna ke nna mo Motšhudi mo Ntshimoge.
She said her name is Motsei Nkwemabala, and she's been married to the Nkwemabala family from Mulepolole, but she is born and raised in Motšhudi, and she stays in a village called Ntshimoge. That's where we are right now. She said that she learned the use of ochre or earth from their mom. She taught her when she was still a baby, even at the cattle post when she kept using ochre, or when she was using this earth on the houses. That's where she got all the techniques and learned how to work with ochre from her mother. Mama have memory ya gago ya ne ba tla ditse go memory ya go ene na rutwa ke mang kana o ithutile go kae.
Motsadi wa me o na rutwa ke batsadi ba gagwe. A tsantsa le monana le ena ba ithuta a ba heletsa itse sengwe sengwe mo teksta.
What she was saying is the mom was also taught by the mother. So it's a technique or a teaching that came from the family. It's nothing that they got from either school or anywhere. It's just from family, learning from one another.
Hi everyone. I hope that was clear and you could see. Now back to my practice. With the Botswana ochres, the very first project that I decided to do using the ochres and exploring their colors and their textures was to do a series of what I called earth portraits of people around me that I was working with. So this is one of the first images where I used the ochres from Motšhudi. It's called Didans van Dirin, and it's a friend of mine who's an amazing artist called Hanin Conradi. So I did a series of portraits. I think in the next image, in the next slide, we can see. So on my left is a portrait of Motsei herself, and then on my right is a portrait of a friend of mine who is called the Shepherd. And so my work at that, so what I did was I tried to make portraits of people from Botswana, and well, Hani is not from Botswana, but she is kind of, that using the earth, so joining the human figure with the earth, which is something that I've always been interested in terms of looking at the human condition. And I found that working with the ochres, it's just like such an amazing symbolic and also visual joining of the way that my interests and the things that I want to talk about in my work. How are we doing with the next slide? Yeah, so my relationship with Motsei has been two-way. So I was going to her place and getting the soil from her, or the earth and the ochres from her, the cakes. And then I wanted her to come to my studio so that she could see what I was doing there. And also, in a way, endorse the images and be part of the conversation about what I was doing. And I think that was a really exciting moment. And I think that this is another moment where we can have some more video from Motsei talking about her own practice and how she uses the ochres where she finds them and stuff like that. So I'm going to mute and
le gore o dirisa eng le gore o kopanya leng ga o dirisa
mo tlholego ne ro tsa mo melapo le gompieno ka re melapo ya ile ya kgama batla solo hala se re ga ke se leba ka matlhaka le ga ke se tshware yana ke tlo re se ka dira mo ke be ke se thuba ke sone ke se thuba ke a se tsa ke be ke tla ke kolobetsa ka metsi a ke sone go kolobetsa ka metsi ke a duba ke tlhakantse le boloko e be ke o dirisa ke dira ka one ke bopela mantlo ke dira bontle bo ke bo batlang
they normally, what she said is they normally got the soil from the river banks, but because people now are against that, so what they do is they normally go around either hills where it's slightly far away from the village to get the pigments from there, and then they come collect it and bring it home, where they get to mix it with water or soak it for some time. And then they also collect the cow to mix it, the cow down to mix it with it, so that it can be able to hold last. As you can, if you can come closer, you'll see that it's quite hard. It doesn't come out even if you touch it. Also, she said the reason why they mix it with this because for the rain, when it rains, it doesn't wash away the pigments so that it lasts longer. Ke batla gore anong re bolelle ka tiriso ya itse gore o mongwe o dirisetsa mo mantleng ya ne batla go itse gore o mongwe le tiriso ya teng ke ya eng.
tiriso tsa mebu di dintsi ke go dira mantlo o penta ka one go dira lapalapana lo e leng gore tiriso engwe ya bobedi ke ya ga ke dirisa sedimo thata ke le motho o thusang batho mme ke ba thusa ka sedimo ga ke dirile ya ka o bona ke dirile ya ga ke kopa ke a re ya ke be ke bua le bone ke ba bona batla na ke tshitsa batho teng e ba mpolella se ke se tlhoka.
She mentioned that the uses for F pigment is, one is to decorate the houses, like you can see, she uses it to decorate the houses. Another one is for traditional healing. She said for this particular one, it's for traditional healing where she asks for help from the spiritual people. She comes and kneels down and then she prays, basically. And I got on Pulalano for a Lulapala panel, keenly drew ka Swana, and do that toilet of hat, a sing also there is some
mo a Setswana o go tlhoka thata mo sedimong ka gore ke dilo tsa tlholego batho ba bogologolo na ba dirisa dilo tsa Setswana thata na ba sa dirisa Sekgowa yaanong ke se reng ga o dirisa sedimo o dirisa Setswana sengwe le sengwe sa teng le Setswana ha ke ba ha bojalwa ya ka ha ke dirilane le monna mogolo le mosadi mogolo ke tla le bojalwa ka phafana ke be ke re monna mogolo ke go tliseditse bojalwa ke botsa o no batho ba mogolo na ba rata bojalwa ba Setswana ke a tshela ha pela ga gagwe mo ke dirileng ke be ke re mosadi mogolo ba gago ke bolo yena tsa o no ke a tshela ha teng ka ha ke ntse ke ba bolelela gore le nkile di atlametse le ntho ba tse di tlhoka le mphe masego le matlhogonono ke ngwana wa lona o le nthumileng tiro ye gore ke e dire yaanong ke sentse o bonang bontsi ba nna gore dirisa dilo tsa Setswana le ga ke dira tiro ya bone ke na le nako ya go dira tiro ya bone ke dirisa dilo tse leng tsa Setswana dinkgwana diphapana legofo ga ke dirise sepe sa go shopa.
What she says is the reason why she uses the earth of traditional pigments is because she gets it from the elder people. So the elder people used only traditional things. That's why she's maintaining the traditional things. And one thing that she also mentioned is she also uses the traditional pots to come and ask for guidance from the elder. So there are two sides here. There's the grandmother and the grandfather. So she brings the traditional beer because elder people loved the traditional beer. So she brings the traditional beer to put on two sides while she's asking for guidance from the elder people.
Hi. Yeah, it's just always so amazing watching the video. But we took those videos this morning and yeah, we were so disappointed that we couldn't have Motsei with us. And I don't know about the lag. It was a little bit of lag, but the sound was fantastic. But she's so animated and passionate about the pigments in the same way I am. And the amazing thing is that she has the same birthday date as me. We're both born on the 27th of July. So she was talking about how the spirits guide her, and they kind of tell her to build a little house in her yard that's traditional and to decorate it. And so I said to her, do you think that that the spirits sent me to you? And she said, yeah, well, of course, which was kind of nice. I've also asked her to take me out to some sites outside of the village where you get a much finer range of pigments, which we've done together. And this slide is showing Motsei actually digging out a purple in a very, very old riverbed. Can we have the next slide? Yeah, anyway, it's very okay. So now this is back to the image that I made of Motsei. She came to my studio and I asked her if she liked the work that I was doing, and she said that she liked it very much. And then I asked her if she would perhaps be happy to model for me, which meant lying on a table on a piece of paper and having me draw around her, and then having me make an artwork. And so this is this slide is showing the top half of the artwork. And then if we have the next slide, Tammy, yeah, and so this is the bottom half. And these artworks were very much based on the idea of naming. And naming is something that's very, very private and spiritual, but also can be public. Here is Motsei lying on getting drawn around, and her name is Motsei, which means to take, and it can also mean to be taken as a bride. And she said to me, I take things and I transform them into other things, like an artist does. You take the earth and you make it into an artwork, or she takes the earth and she tries to help people, heal people, or she makes the beautiful house where she heals people with that earth. So in a way, we both do that together. And so I spoke to a really wonderful linguist at University of Botswana, And I was asking him what the meaning of Motsei was, and he was saying it can be to take or to be taken. And he said at the end of the day, when you name a child, it's about the dreams and aspirations of the family. And I thought that that was really, really beautiful. So I asked Motsei, what would you like me to give you in your portrait? And she said, I want cattle and I want goats. So I gave her an Nguni bull, which the Swana cow is related to. And I gave her some Boer goats. I think that they're on the other slide. Yeah, there they are. And yeah, so I love the idea of naming a child for dreams and aspirations. And this thing with language, with English to Setswana, I think it's a link when you understand or try to understand a language that it's not your mother tongue. There's such beautiful poetry in the translations and in the understanding between two people of what that actually means. And so I named this piece The Dreams and Aspirations. This is an image of Machudi, where Motsei lives. And this is actually not where she lives. She lives on the edge where we were doing the videos. But this is central Machudi. It's absolutely beautiful village. And she takes some of her soils, her creams, she would say, her pink whites and her yellow whites from the hillside behind us that I'm photographing from. And yeah, so she took us to these sites in the village that are still available to her and this is actually these pigments that she was taking right here on the sites where her mother introduced her to. And you can see we're talking about whites, yellow whites, pink whites, and it's up to the gatherer to decide what kind of white they want and where they take the earth from, because it's so varied. As you see, have very, very white areas, and you have more pinky areas and more yellowy areas. And she's an incredible expert in deciding where she wants to take the color that she needs to use. And also, if I say I'd like a pink, then she'll try and find that color for me. So right now we're in a very, very interesting and nice relationship in terms of her providing my colors. And as our relationship grows, it's going to be an interesting journey, and also asking her about the meanings of colors. And this is her yard. This is the beginning of her house when I first met her with the first paintings. Yeah, and so anyway, let's have some more videos from her. I think there's the last 3, and then after that it will be the end of this part of the presentation, and we can go to questions. I'm sure everyone's got loads of questions, so maybe we can have the last word from Motsei, and I'll mute.
Hape o montle hela gore wa nkgatla le mo matlhong a ka hela ke o rata hela gore color a teng, mme yaanong boshibidu gape ka ha sedimo ke bo rata thata ka gore ke motho wa mathata, ebile boshibidu e mo ntlong ya ke kgona go dirisa le one ke re se cheap thata ka gore ke so se ke se ratang ka gore ga ke se dirisa mathata a ka kgona go afoga ka lebaka la gore ke na le tumelo mo go.
She just explained that she likes red. She loves red, but red also has a spiritual meaning to her. It heals her. She also uses a red candle in her house to just pray and to ask for any forgiveness or anything related to spiritual. That's why she really, really loves or likes the use of red.
Melemo ya ke yone e ke thusang balwetse ka yone.
She built this house because she loves traditional houses, But another thing is the main reason for building this house is to actually heal people and to use it as a traditional medicine house, as you can see. Go na le bagolo ba e leng gore ba ka itse leina la le 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 ka gore ke leina le le ntšha kana ke ra gompieno.
Ga ke itse tota, ga ke itse gore a ba teng. Ke tla le ka nna ke ba botsa ba ba santseng ba le teng mo botshelong.
Go na le mo tala kana o mo tala ba lwatsi le ba ditlhapi. There's no green. Oh, sky blue pigments.
So Tumi, can you ask Motsei? Hi, that was great. So now I think we're going to
let's start sharing and go start the discussion. And I'd love to ask Tumi something to start with, because I've so enjoyed his translations, and I love what you said, Anne. It's so easy to be frustrated with not being able to understand people and have these language gaps, but there's something so beautiful about it as well. And I love how you mentioned that it is this thing that we're all learning from each other, and we can actually just appreciate the language for its beauty, not just for its meaning, and I think it's very easy to just, want to wish that we could speak Setswana or know more Setswana, or that people, especially as English speakers, I think we're especially bad, that we, don't get to learn or don't need to learn a lot of languages. And so it's just wonderful to have that. But Tumi, I just wanted to ask you about your experiences, how you've enjoyed going with Anne and Motsei, and also I love that Motsei's favorite color is also the red. So what is your favorite color of all these earth pigments? You can put on your video as well and unmute. There we go.
Hello everyone, I hope everyone is good. It has been quite an interesting journey. Well, it took me back to my childhood, where I was, I had to help my mom as well. My mom also used pigments to actually do the kitchen. We have an outside kitchen at the cattle post / at the farm. So she also used pigments to renovate or to use it as paint for the floor. So it kind of reminded me of the back days where we had to go around to collect soil and have to come and help her with, mixing the soil and everything. By then I didn't know the meaning, whether it was important to actually use pigments, or I didn't understand the whole logic of me having to go and collect soil and having to help her with the soil. So the whole journey kind of reminded me, or took me back where I had to collect it. So another thing that also I can highlight is when you sit or when you are inside a traditional house that has been built or that they used pigments around it, it's quite cool and it's very chilling, and the smell also is quite, it smells very nice. So the journey has been quite nice. But the color that I specifically kind of like is black. Black is it's kind of a nice color that I like. It's quite beautiful. Even if when you, Anne uses it, it's a beautiful color when it comes out on a particular paper or a fabric. It's quite beautiful. So I like black.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's interesting thinking of others that Anne and Motsei were saying that red was their color, and they love that strong red, and that's exactly what we find in the deep past as well. That is it this thing as humans that we pull to it, or is it something in the chemistry as well that we pull to, or why is it this color? Is it that it's so noticeable in nature as well, compared to all the greens and the browns? These bright reds are just so distinctive. But I'd like to ask Beth if she could join us. So Beth and Anne and myself and some others, we've been working together on a paper, and Beth actually started this whole project looking at how we approach ochre in the past and looking at the ochre in deep time. And what I found hard as a scientist is to have this objectivity, but dealing with such a subjective subject and dealing with humans. I mean, we're all so different, but what are your opinions, and how are you feeling about ochre and ochre research?
Should I speak first?
Yeah, sure, you go, Beth.
Okay, great, thanks. And thanks for the presentations, Tammy and Anne, and the videos were also amazing. It's nice to see like how it can kind of go off into these different directions, and I think it's so serendipitous that this session was organized by you and by Julie and by Anne and whatnot. But your question, it's certainly not an easy one. It's quite big, right? Yeah. I think that's in a way, as a scientist, you're always trying to answer these questions quite objectively, right? You don't want to be influenced by your own perspectives or opinions or your own biases. And I think that early on, I was trying really hard to be quite objective and not have this influence of what I think and what my opinion is. And I think that in archaeology, it's quite easy to, when you have that focus, and in ochre specifically, it is quite easy to block everything else out and look at questions. Okay, what's the geological perspective of these sorts of things? Where were people going? How were they collecting these materials? And you can still answer a lot of really interesting questions about the past. But I think for me, this transition happened when I realized that, I was experiencing new things with different people and seeing how other people researched ochre, not even researched, but interacted with, worked with, experienced it. And I was thinking, man, like what we're writing is such a small percentage of what people are actually experiencing and what I'm experiencing, and how people all over the world of all walks of life are using it. And I think that, in archaeology, a big focus is how do we connect, ethnography with the past or these sorts of things. But then I realized that it's so much bigger than that too. So I think it's quite difficult now. And I think we still, as ochre researchers, have a lot of work to do in trying to figure out, okay, how do we sort of reconcile this multitude of modern day experiences and uses with the way that people were using it in the past. And maybe Anne had a good point that, maybe the mystery is just fine. Maybe we don't need to know everything. And, there are questions we can answer for sure, but maybe understanding how it impacts us today is just as important. So I don't know, maybe that was a bit of a transgression, but it's just amazing to see, like, when you kind of start to go down one road, all these other roads pop up, and it's just an exponential experience. So it's been quite amazing working with you guys and everybody on this.
Yeah, for me as well. Anne, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, it's like, it is amazing. It's like, I think all of us could say that it's almost been like I've taken my whole life as a visual artist to come to the realization this is what I wanted to do all along. Because I love the combination of the past and the present and the future that ochre contains for us as human beings, because I love the idea of that ancient use, the deep time. I know deep time is beyond humans, but that idea, and that kind of links us now. And my pressing thing, I think, for what I would like to think about and do is think about the environment and how we cherish and care for our earths. And maybe that's the way. Obviously, archaeological research and historical research informs what we do right now, and it's really, really important. And that mystery is beautiful, and that's something that art touches on. And I just wanted to say something about the red. My favorite color is that Sinete red, because it smells and tastes and looks like blood when it's dry, when it's wet, and it's human. It's like the earth's a human being, and a human being is earth. So all these ideas and things are in our heads right now. They must have been 500,000 years ago as well. I know I'm not allowed to say stuff like that, but I am an artist. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think that's the whole difficulty of it, is that, you know, we are dealing with so many unknowns that you kind of, this is the way we feel about it, but you know, what are we actually seeing in the archaeological record? So it's really hard, but I think it's important to understand that, and to understand that there are these connections that so many people do feel with earth pigments and with the earth, and different substances. And so it's important to kind of incorporate that into archaeological and scientific practice when we can, you know. One thing I wanted to ask, maybe to me or Anne, I just wanted to know, so Motsei said that she wasn't allowed anymore to collect from the river, or, you know, she said that, you know, they didn't want them to collect from certain places anymore. Is that because a lot of people are using the sand from the river and they're using it for industry, or what was the reasoning behind that?
To me?
The reason behind it is, I think a lot of people don't want people to kind of seeing people digging around that area, assuming that area, which is not that area. That's the main reason, basically, is people don't like seeing people digging and taking earth or pigments around people, where people are actually based at. It's not really a matter of whether you need to have a license or anything. It's just people's belief that, you know, people are literally taking everything from where we are living. So it's nothing that is written down by the government or anything. It's just people saying it from themselves, basically.
And another thing I was thinking of, like working with cow dung, you know, we've kind of done different experiments with what kind of paints work better and what actually stays on your body, and obviously going back, you know, 100,000 years, there weren't cattle, but and you wouldn't be able to get dung as easily. But it is something interesting to think of, you know, that actually mixing it with, I mean, dusty poo, or, you know, like there's, and, you know, obviously you have to look into health issues with certain dung, but yeah, and actually looking at these, you know, mixing the pigments with other animal elements that are around, you know, and does what actually is the final product that is made from that, and could it make a really nice paint, for example, you know. So I've been thinking of all these ideas of experiments I want to do. But I want to open up. Cool. Yeah. Sorry, Timmy.
And one thing that they said is, so the cow dung has to be fresh for you to use it. So you can't use older ones. So you have to use a fresher one. So you take the fresh one, and then you have to. Then that's when you can either preserve it if it's fresh. You take it and then you cover it, but you can't use an older one.
Okay. So yeah, that would be a problem if you're going around trying to collect little bucks, dung from bucks. Cool. I also wanted to ask if there's anyone in the audience that wanted to ask a question. You can just put up your hand, or you can just unmute yourself and put on your camera if you want. If there are any questions or comments.
Oh, well, okay.
Cool. Hi, Camilla. Cool.
Hi. Just from a very hot London. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much for putting on this this event and linking with Anne and Motsei and Tumi, and it's just wonderful. I'm a close colleague of Ian Watts. People might know we've written a lot about what we envisage are reasons for ritual practices in deep time of the kind that, and with the colours and the ochres that we're talking about today. What really struck me from Anne Motsei's film, well, it is really showing the extraordinary interest and tradition for women's involvement, women's collection of materials, women's use of medicines. I'm very interested in if Motsei is using those medicines in relation to women's reproduction, particularly. But I just wanted also to say something, because you were showing a great array of the MSA and even previous to MSA archaeology. The Van der Werk material and the Kuruman Hills material that Ian's done a lot with. And of course, the setting of the Van der Werk cave stuff there it's very difficult to interpret, except in understanding it, because it's so deep inside the hillside, that it would need light, and it looks as though it is a place where those materials would have been used for some form of ritual practice, even at that really considerable age, pre-Homo sapiens age. The other thing to say is, of course, there is specularite, clara, there, as well as the utilized hematite. And specularite which is the silvery gray form of hematite, sparkly, which was so loved by Khoisan peoples, it still is. And that has no other usage except for visual display ethnographically. Even though red ochres may be found used or ochres may be found used for other things, specularite doesn't. And of course, the specularite in the Kuruman Hills sites seems to have come from very far away sources. And I know that Beth is particularly interested in the whole issue of sourcing geologically the materials. Just a couple of points in that. But I'm very interested if Motsei has any more to say on healing in relation to women's reproduction.
Cool. Maybe Tumi or Anne, you can answer that. There's some really interesting points. I recently collected some specularites. I'm going to do some experiments, many experiments for years.
Well, I'll just jump in here. The really interesting thing is when I first met Motsei and I went back to her yard to meet her and the family and see the house, because she invited me to come and watch her to paint it, and it was just the walls and there was no roof or anything. And I said to her, so what is this house going to be used for? Because her main house, where she and her family live, is a cement house with metal roof, and but this special little house is a traditional earth house. We put tin on the top, but it's a special house, and she decorates it. And she said, in that house, I will massage pregnant women. And then she said that she was particularly interested in the healing of women and children. And I haven't gone into that with her because now it's changed. Her husband is a traditional healer. And I think together, and I think that the whole COVID situation, and they also run a church from their yard generally, but the whole COVID situation has skewed everything. So they're adapting to that. But I haven't sat down and had a conversation with her, but it's very interesting that that was the first thing that she said that house was for, if that's something.
And does she use ochre for the healing? Is that part of the process, the pigments? Don't know.
I don't know. I haven't. I think that they currently, what I can understand is that they provide a structure within which healing happens. For instance, like the beer wells that you saw for the ancestors, for the grandfather and the grandmother, they're made from, the ochres mixed with kraal manure. So that the ochre is the vessel that leads to the spiritual. But I can't say. I'm just kind of making it up. But she definitely did say that she was going to use that house for massaging pregnant women. And I'm going to give her the recording of this, and Tumi will translate, and she'll give me a good slap, probably. We need to speak about that.
We've got a question in the chat for Tumi. Did you and your mum use red pigment on the floor and perhaps flatten and shine it with a flat stone? Or 1 or 2 generations ago, floors were made that way in Egan, I don't know how to say it, island homes, but with earth taken from specific places because we were all living in one big village. So just ask the process of how you make the floors. Oh, it's frozen.
Okay. Thank you for that. Mostly when she did the floor, she used mostly black. So the color is black mostly, or brown into black. But in terms of flattening, we don't shine it. You can't use any stone to shine it. She uses her hand to just flatten the place, the whole floor. She uses her hand to flatten it, but we don't use any stone to shine it at all.
Cool. And then a question for Anne. When you were working with the earth pigments, is it also a ritualistic experience for you? And where do you mentally go to during your working process with ochre and earth, during the process of working with earth pigments?
Well, I think I have to really say that it's a real struggle in the studio, because the process is such a huge part of making the work. I would say the work takes 5 minutes and the process takes 3 months. And so it's beautiful, because I'm very, very interested in the breakdown of the pigments and the way they smell, the way their texture, and because they smell and they have texture and they taste and they look all different, and they each have their own personality. So I wouldn't say that I go into a spiritual space, but I really connect with the different pigments. And that's something that I'm really, really interested in doing, is to catalog the colors and then Setswana names and the places that they come from, and make like an archive for Botswana of the different ochres and the different range of colors. And it's going to take me years and years and years, but I know that that's what I want to do. And that feeds into the work that I make, comes up, the better work that I make would come out of that process. And I'm scared to go there, because it's like, oh, it's so academic. No, it's getting so sort of kind of, I don't know, but it's what drives, in a way, what just drives inspiration. And in fact, it probably at the end of the day creates the better work, because it's driven by my experience with touching the pigments and being with them, and how they feel and how they smell. And they're really amazing. They have different personalities, as you know, Tammy, probably.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the weird thing with archaeology, is that you can't touch the pieces that much. You don't want to damage them. You don't want to mark them in any way, and so you don't get to interact with them in the same way. But I just want to ask. There's another question. There's a few more questions. There's a question for Tumi again on the black pigment. What is the spiritual or traditional meaning to you about the black pigment?
To me, it doesn't really have any traditional meaning. But when we asked Motsei, she mentioned that when she helps women, when she helps people, the black one is specifically for if you have any bad luck or any bad spirit. They use the black pigment to wash away the black spirit or black bad spirit around you. That's what she said. So to me personally, it doesn't have any traditional meaning.
Oh, and I think the last one, we're going to have to close soonish. But I really hope that we can carry on these conversations in another format, maybe in another few months, It's just been so nice to connect with everyone, but I know there's so many more conversations that could be had. But another question, or yeah, it was mentioned that the cakes smell delicious. Could you please tell us more about the smell? Does it smell nice once it's dried as well? And is there anything added to the pigments in the cakes, I think?
Okay, so I source my my ochres from two different sources. Motsei is my major source for a very wide range of colors from Machudi. And those, yeah, they smell, they like, I think it's called petrichor, like the rain when it falls on earth, but they smell perfumed. Some of the pigments smell like they've got perfume in them, and which is beyond petrichor. It's beyond that smell of the rain on hot earth. It's like sweet, and some smell like peppermint. The white clays, they're pepperminty. I'm literally spooning them up and no, I haven't eaten them, but so then the other source of my pigments is from the traders at the station, and they trade in letsoku, which is it's used to, it's a foundation. It's they say it's to varnish your skin and make you more beautiful. And you can become yellow, or you can become pink or red or dark brown, depending on what you want. And they are sold by different kinds of ladies. There's the Kalanga ladies, and all of the soils come from the eastern side of Botswana, the east, from north to south. And they all have incredible, yeah, they have very, very, very strong, sweet smells. But the one set of pigments that I bought, a purple, which I think are from Labatsi, I'm not sure, but they've been cut with maize meal, so they smell like baby food. And when I tried to, I don't know, what is the word when you wash soil? Levitate? When you wash it to get the silt away. So I do that as well as crushing. And I've now got these fizzing, popping, molding cakes of purple, which are basically purple mealie meal. So, but that's not common. That's the only time I've ever found an ochre that's been cut with another thing, and it's not normal. That's not usually, and I'll throw it away. I'll take some photographs and then I'll throw it away. They're like growing in my studio as we speak. But generally speaking, the best letsoku is pure soil, and it smells like heaven, most of it. Yeah.
Cool. Beth, I see your hands up. Would you like to ask something?
Yeah, I'll come back. I was curious just to kind of go back to this, and listening to Ann and Tumelo talk about this is so great. I was just curious, going back to your original question, Tammy, of this subjectivity versus objectivity thing, and us. I know that there's several academics or archaeologists here in the crowd who are studying ochre, or at least attempting to, through a more objective perspective. But I'm just wondering, I think the important thing with ochre is that we can't, it's a shame to take the human out of it, the humanistic aspect out of it, because it's obviously, there's such a deep connection and through us and whatever else, that it seems like such a shame. So I'm wondering if Ann and maybe Tumi have some comments, or some, I don't want to say advice, but maybe something to think about for us archaeologists who are, really trying to explore these questions and how they relate to deep time, and how humans and ochre have been interacting in their experience, their experiences with that, and maybe anything we can learn from their experiences.
Well, I think in the same way that I learn from the experiences I get interacting with you, Beth, and with Tammy, and your really, really very strict analysis. I love that. It's fascinating. And it's also, your objectivity is really interesting, because you can't just jump to conclusions. Well, you can't. So that leaves us free too. But I think the really interesting thing is what people are doing now and their reactions now to, like, for instance, the human things like smell, touch, the passion that I've noticed with everyone who's involved in ochre, going right off at one end to the spiritual and the angels, and down to the other end to, like, Beth, your colleague, who investigates particles of ochre under a microscope,
Magnets.
and is just as passionate and fascinated and crazy as everyone else who's saying, oh, but it smells like perfume and I could eat it and cover myself in it. He's just as passionate in his own way. So I think that we have to be driven by our curiosity in whatever field we're working in, that opens us up to other people and other people's ideas. And it's not closed and it's not narrow, and that we share. I mean, that's what this is all about. And the intermingling of disciplines, there's a word for it, an academic interdisciplinary. It's like I have my dogs sometimes run all over my artwork, and Julie says, oh, it's interspecies collaboration. I love it. So I think it's about collaboration and sharing experience and knowledge, and encouraging each other and supporting each other. Like I just got a message saying it's levigate. So now I can Google that and look it up and figure out what I'm doing. I'm levigating. It's great because I've looked it up and I couldn't find it. But anyway, it's this intermingling of minds, which is the most important thing to give us, for instance, Beth, you're working so hard, and Tammy, on particular things, and a conversation with someone or listening to Motsei say something, maybe suddenly triggers a link with something that will answer some questions for you, or for her if she wants, you know. So yeah, I can't wait to take her to the Origin Center, and to me as well, because that's going to be just amazing.
Yeah, great. Tumi, do you want to say anything?
Well, I just wanted to say it has been a great journey, just following Ann and helping her with her work, especially as me, a young person like me. You know, I've never thought using pigment, it's such a big deal. You just ask people, wonder, and ask people, why are you still using, you know, earth, you know. So I've learned the importance of it, and it has opened my mind to actually understand why my parents or my grandparents actually used pigments to beautify their houses. Actually, in Setswana, it's called lekhapo. When you do the painting, it's called wabukhapa. So it simply means you are actually painting using your hands, basically. So it has been quite a very interesting journey.
Good. Cool. And then there's the last question about the ochre and decaying, to stop the decay process on hides. So that was mainly research done by Rian Rifkin, which I'd happily send to you if you want. And he did his research on using different types of ochre, and the red ochre was just better in getting a softer hide and actually stopping the process a little bit better. So as far as I know, I can't remember now, but as far as I know, he mixed it with animal fats as he scraped the hide. But I would have to check. But you're welcome to send me a message or something, and I can send you the paper. He's done some great work and has since moved out of the ochre world. But there's still lots of amazing ochre researchers that are in there, and still so many questions to answer and things to be inspired by, as we've spoken about tonight. So it's really nice. Thank you for all your comments. It's been so nice, and I really would love to have a workshop. Someone mentioned about smell-o-vision, that we, you know, if we could have something where we could have these different ways of smelling things and interacting with the materials. And so it would be so nice in a post-COVID world if we could, you know, have a workshop sometime, or meet at a conference or at something at Origin Center where we can actually connect with each other and
Yes,
actually feel these materials and smell them and taste them.
yeah, totally.
Cool. Okay, but please feel free to send messages or interact with us if there's anything coming from this further. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been awesome. Cool. Okay. So I suppose bye. Don't want to say goodbye. I could carry on talking for ages, but bye.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Thanks. It's been amazing, really.
Thanks.